Lee, welcome to the Easy Conversations podcast. Thank you for joining me today. I'm really grateful for you to join me and looking forward to us talking about your experience and also the work you're doing, especially in the Olympics side and working with athletes and performers, and then hopefully get some practical wisdom that we can learn, not only myself, but the audience today. But before we get into that, I do want to give you an opportunity to share with the listeners a little bit about yourself, what's brought you here, and who you are.
Wow, Furkhan, thanks for having me on. And yeah, that's a story. How far back do we want to go and how much time do you have?
Well, how far back can you go? I know we've had the opportunity to talk about a little bit of your background, which I
Mm,
think is helpful to understand because that will also allow us to appreciate where you got that resilience from.
yeah, thank you. As a young man or young guy, I realized pretty early that my dad was not a decent person.
Mm.
My upbringing was quite unusual. My dad lived with two women, and he took it in turns as to whose bedroom he slept in that night. I didn't know that was unusual until I started school, and not everybody else has two mums. Is that weird? And I had a half sister that was a month older than me. I was from my mum. She was from the other lady, Sally. And my dad was also out a lot, womanizing a lot. Like his life was basically set up around getting his needs met.
Mm.
And as somebody working in this coaching space now, and with the knowledge that I have, I now know that he would have been clinically diagnosed as a sociopathic narcissist. So no ability to feel empathy for others, only interested in getting his needs met. And everybody, including me and his other children, were tools for him to get his needs met. Yeah, as little boys and girls, we don't know that. We don't have that logical reasoning to go, oh, my dad's not a decent person. I shouldn't learn from him, or he's not my vision of what masculinity is.
Mhm.
As I got older, and certainly my early teenage years, that's why I can really remember distinctly thinking, this isn't right. I don't want to be like him, but I don't know what I do want to be. And at the same time, I was getting this messaging in school that I was really bright but lazy. And I'm 52 now. Those of us that I don't know if we see this on YouTube as well, but you'll see my grey beard. You can see how old I am. But back in that time, the things that I've now discovered later in life the way my brain works, we didn't really know about them. They weren't tested for, and certainly schools did not accommodate you for them. So only fairly recently, we're talking the last 3 or 4 years, I've been diagnosed as dyslexic, and even more recently as on the autism spectrum.
Mhm.
And this messaging I got at school was, you're lazy, you're really bright, you're letting yourself down, you're letting the school down.
Mm.
And as an adult, I don't think anybody that knows me would think I was lazy. In fact, quite the opposite. They would say I'm very industrious, very hardworking, very determined, very driven. So I struggled with this messaging because it didn't feel quite right. Yeah, I know that I was also struggling in school. So maths, physics, chemistry, top of the school, especially so I'm from the UK. In UK, you study those subjects till you're 16, then you do A levels.
Yeah.
It was so easy for me up to that point. I didn't have to study, didn't do homework. It felt so easy. However, anything involving English was more challenging. I loved reading sci-fi novels, complex books, but I struggled to read until I was 7 or 8. And then a flip switch for me. Suddenly I could read, and then I was reading novels. However, I've always struggled with spelling.
Mm.
And another thing that happens for me is I can't locate a word. And the best way I can describe it is if you imagine the back of your brain, there being hundreds of drawers opening and closing at the same time as I'm trying to find the word or trying to spell a word. And it can be like a 4-letter word, and I don't even know how to spell it.
Mm.
I'm very blessed now with the technology that we have where I can speak to Siri and she can spell a word for me, or I can use products like Grammarly that can correct my grammar. One of the things with being dyslexic is you miss words in the sentence. So when I write emails, Grammarly then corrects me, and there's like lots of the, it words that were just missing. So what this meant was going to further education, which would be a typical path for somebody with my intellect. was not really a choice for me. I struggled when I went to A levels, and the level of homework required went up, the level of study went up. I suddenly really started struggling. At the same time, I was also competing at high level in track sprint cycling. So I went that route. I'm like, I'm going to do that. Did that for about 3 years, realized that while I was good at a national level, I wasn't going to win the Olympics. And at that point in the UK, there was no funding. We were poor. My family couldn't fund me to do it. I just couldn't afford to do it anymore. I was working part-time and I couldn't balance that and be a professional athlete. I had that kind of come to Jesus moment. I think I was 20 years old. What do I want the rest of my life to be like? I can't mess around pretending to be a sportsman. I'm not really, I was working parking cars in a casino in the evenings. That was not a career. What am I going to do? And if you're pretty bright and you don't have a defined educational background, you go into sales. So I went into sales. So I worked in real estate for 6 years for a large corporate company, which was actually fantastic. I didn't really love the job of being a real estate salesman, but I got incredible training on how to run a business, how to lead, how to work effectively with other people. I then started my own real estate business, and at the same time was getting back into sport and competing at a high level again. And I started coaching young riders for fun because I was the only sprint athlete at the local velodrome. By now, there was this new program in the UK with lots of funding for sport. So a lot more younger athletes were coming into it. And there wasn't a lot of sprint coaches. So I started coaching athletes. And it was 2007. I was at the European Championships in Germany, sitting there watching an athlete that I was coaching compete, sitting with his dad in the stands. And I thought, I don't want to go back to being a real estate agent. Luckily, this coincided with the market taking a downturn. And I sold my business in December 2007. And a property crash happened in January 2008. I got incredibly lucky. I sold my business at a price that allowed me to take some time off and consider what was next in life. And a month later, it would have been worthless. So I consider that a very lucky moment in my life. So then I went into full-time sports coaching. Did that, ended up becoming the national team coach for USA Cycling. So ended up moving from the UK to California because who doesn't want more sunshine in their life? Ended up becoming the national team coach for USA Cycling. COVID hit and it felt like a time for another pivot. Through my cycling coaching career, to begin with, I was obsessed with physiology. Then it became aerodynamics and mechanics, and then it went to psychology. And I think because of my autism and because from a young age, I've had to watch other people behave to understand what's appropriate behavior and how to be more effective, I've always had a very keen interest in human beings and how we work and the choices we make. And also because I didn't want to be like my dad, I'm like, okay, what do I want to be like? So a lot of my life, I've been a student. First, it was taking things apart, making things Lego Meccano. Then it was biology. And then especially it was psychology. So I'm a student of psychology. I love figuring out why we do the things we do from a social and evolutionary viewpoint. And I was listening to a podcast of a leadership coach that a friend sent me and said I might be interested in. Didn't even know leadership coaching existed. I knew consultancy existed, but not leadership coaching. Listened to this podcast, played it to my wife, who's a psychotherapist, and she went, that's what you should be doing. That evening, we were watching Billions, TV show that has a performance coach in it called Wendy Rhodes. And we just looked at each other and went, that's it. That's what I want to do. And I remember watching the character and thinking, I would never be able to do what they're doing. And I now do it and I'm great at it. And it was so interesting to see how that changed and how we learn these new skills.
Yeah. Thank you for sharing all that. It's been quite the journey. And I definitely relate to the psychology part for sure, because that's something I've chosen later in life as well as a career change. And part of it is driven by observing people and trying to understand why people behave a certain way. Because I think for me personally, it's really helped me in navigating my own life and just having a deeper understanding of beyond just day-to-day behavior, what is the purpose of being here and being in this world? So I can definitely relate to that. But I do want to come back to some of the earlier stages, especially around school and being told that you're lazy, or then even realizing for yourself that maybe academics is not something I can pursue and I may need to find different direction in life. How are you able to navigate the shame that comes from some of that? Especially for men, we tend to inherit it based on a lot of our focus, especially early in life, is performative. And even hearing like your relationship perhaps with your dad wasn't in the best place, and not having that male role model can further compound that aspect of shame and being performative. And I know another thing you had shared with me was how your relationship to men changed as well at some point. So are you able to shed some light on that?
Yeah, great question. I think the shame thing was really interesting.
Hmm.
I didn't know that I felt shame. Like many men, I didn't know what I was feeling. I knew I wasn't happy, but I didn't know what I was feeling. And I wouldn't have had the language to call it shame. And I'm not even sure I had that until fairly recently.
Mm.
I did cycling. Why did I do cycling? Because that was my dad's sport. You know, I was captain of the school rugby team. I swam for my counties. It's like swimming for California. I didn't continue with those sports. I continued with cycling and ended up doing it for 35 years. And there was a point where that switched to, I'm doing this for me, not to show off to my dad. But I definitely started that because that was my dad's sport. And then one of the pivotal things for me, and I think this is what really helped me work through that shame and understand who I was working with an osteopath, so chiropractor here.
Hmm.
And he said, look, you've got some issues with your back we're going to deal with, but you're also carrying a lot of stress, especially for a young guy. I was like early 20s at this point. And he said, you need to speak to my friend James. And James, psychotherapist. Like any young British man, I was like, fuck you. No interest in that. Thanks very much.
Yeah.
My brain's great. Why would I do that? And I kept seeing him and he's like, just speak to the guy, just have a conversation with him. So it took about 6 months and eventually I did, had that first conversation. That was the change point in my life. I had this opportunity to express myself, hear myself, talk about things I've not really shared with anybody else in any meaningful way, not knowing how to. And obviously, a skilled therapist is going to get that out of you. And 2 or 3 sessions in, James said to me, I think a lot of this is going to be about your relationship with your father. And I was like, no way. I haven't cared about that guy since I was 14, 15 years old. He doesn't have any influence on me. James smiled back at me with the kind smile that therapists have.
Yeah.
And we carried on working with each other. 6 months later, I remember quite distinctly turning to James and going, I think a lot of this has to do with my relationship with my father. And he chuckled, and then the work really started. And about that point, he said, I think you're ready to join a men's group.
Mm.
And I didn't know what a men's group was. I knew that my relationships with men were not what I wanted. My dad didn't really have friends. He had a group of guys that he went for a ride with that I used to go with him with sometimes. And they were lovely guys, but he didn't see them outside of that. It was just to do sport with. So my relationship with men, I knew I wanted a deeper relationship with men and people. And I was good at making relationships with women, but not so much with men.
Hmm.
I knew I wanted these things. I didn't really know how to do it. And I typically had relationships with men via sport or via going out nightclubbing to meet women. That's the relationships I had with
Yeah.
men. And even that, we would go out clubbing, we'd go into the nightclub or the bar, and I'm old enough. That's how we met women before internet dating. And everybody just dispersed.
Yeah.
And it wasn't really a connective thing. And I'd leave and I'd be like, I want more connection. I couldn't even have that language then. I just knew I felt loneliness. That's the best way to describe it.
Yeah.
So I went to this men's group with not my therapist, but the guy who introduced me to my therapist was also in it. So I went to his men's group because I couldn't go to the one with my therapist. And I just had this wonderful experience. I was the youngest guy in the room. We sit in a circle, a bunch of guys sit down and just share their shit with each other. And I'd never seen men do that before.
Mm.
And I immediately knew this is something I wanted to be part of. It's called MKP, Mankind Project. I think it might be the largest men's group organization in the world, volunteer organization. And I got very lucky. The group I was in, Brighton, had some very mature, wise men, and it was just a great space for me to be in. And I got an incredible amount out of it. It changed my relationships with women and men.
Mhm. Yeah, no, that's amazing. And I've been fortunate enough to participate in men's groups and even facilitate them. So I definitely see the power. In fact, yeah, men's groups help me. Just being a part of that community even navigates a lot of difficult situations in my life. And especially when I was struggling a lot, coming out of the pandemic, I think a lot of us struggled in different ways. And for me, there was that feeling of loneliness. And very similar to what you're sharing, I had a lot of friends, but it was very superficial. And
Yeah.
even when I was in their company, I felt alone. And that sense of loneliness did start creeping up. And the men's groups to really help when you're able to find that sense of community and connection with others.
Yeah.
And that vulnerability is equally important. So then, what were you able to then learn about your relationship with your father, and how were you able to navigate that and move forward? Because a lot of the times, as you can appreciate, even in the therapy space, as much as we feel like, yeah, I know it wasn't a good relationship, but until that healing doesn't happen, it continues to creep up in other areas of our life. And it can even prevent us from living our life fully and be successful in the different endeavors we take on. How were you able to heal that part and then to be where you are today?
Yeah. I think being around other healthy men
Mhm.
was such an important part of that. And I really immersed myself into that. And for whatever reason, I was one of the leaders of our group, even though I was the youngest guy in it. I just loved that and stepping into that role and taking responsibility. And I guess that was the opposite of my dad, who took zero responsibility. So my way to respond was, I'm going to take all the responsibility, and maybe we'll get to the downside of that in a moment. And I think at the same time, as I said, I was training pretty hard in sports still. And I used to use the anger that I felt to him about, hey, we never went to the park and kicked a ball, or the only thing he ever watched me do was cycling, never watched me play rugby or swim or school plays or any of that stuff. And I used that kind of anger and loneliness to fuel a lot of my training at a certain point. And it felt like I exercised it in the training. I was just feeling it. And then I got to this point where I could look at this man who was getting older and a little bit less aggressive than he used to be and a little bit more frail and vulnerable. And I looked at him and went, he had a horrible upbringing himself. A little bit hard to know exactly what he had because he lied about everything, but I know that he had a pretty rough upbringing himself. And I looked at it and went, he's a product of his environment. It's not necessarily his fault. I don't have anger towards my dad anymore. That kind of just went. I had definitely some empathy. And then I also had, he's not healthy. He's not good to be around. So when I moved to America and was 39, I decided to cut contact with him. And I was pretty close to it already. We had a 2-year period where we didn't speak. We had an argument and I just didn't speak to him. And that was quite a joyous point in my life. I'm like, okay. And I realized that cutting contact with him was also super healthy for me. And I did that and it made it a lot easier to move here. So I think the combination of the therapy, the combination of being around other men who were healthy, who could show their emotions. The last time I saw my dad, the kind of final straw was he had many children, like all over the place. The day I left the UK to come to America, a guy reached out to me on Facebook and said, I think we have the same dad. I was 17, 19, and we were driving to a cycling event, me and my dad. And on the way, he said, oh, you're going to meet a new sister today. That stuff was not unusual in my life. I still don't know exactly how many children he has. The last count was 12. But there's this chaotic upbringing. And then I suddenly meet these men. First, this therapist who's just this lovely, wise, older guy that kind of just holds me there and is safe. And then I meet these other guys who are, again, safe, curious, kind, thoughtful in my life. And I think just that was what allowed me to heal, to be honest, just to be around that and be in that presence and share with those guys. And I resonate with what you say about COVID. So my switch from track cycling coach to leadership coach and executive coaching happened during COVID. And I made the switch. I knew I wanted to be some kind of emotional coach. I wasn't sure exactly what. And the first thing I did was to reignite leading men's groups. So when I moved into the cycling coaching realm, I took a step back from that. I struggled to find a group that I liked in LA when I moved here. So I took a break. And then during COVID, a lot of my friends were feeling exactly like you were. They were lonely. They had people around, but they were lonely.
Mhm.
And I created a group first for just my friends. It's like a trial group.
Yeah.
And the difference in our relationships now, these were people that were close friends to me. Our relationships are completely different. Like
Yeah.
it's so beautiful how they've changed. And then they encouraged me and said, you need to do this as a profession. And then I started coaching a bunch of different people and realized that my particular skill set is working with founders and their teams. And I'm very good at coaching multiple people in the same organization.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe this is my autism. I'm really good at boundaries. So I
Yeah.
just don't share stuff. And I'm really good at not leaking information or trying to move people. So I'm very good at helping people work with each other.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm blessed that I get to do that. And I run these men's groups. So I run a lot of them now. And I feel like I do that for low cost, and I do that as an opportunity to give back because what it gave me. There's no way I would be in America having the life I have, being as comfortable emotionally as I am, married to a super smart therapist. Like that couldn't happen without doing men's groups and
Yeah.
therapy. So here I am.
Yeah. Yeah. No, that's wonderful. And you touched on this notion of overcompensating when you look
Mhm.
at your father and then taking on extra responsibility. But then
Yeah.
there's this aspect of naturally gravitating towards leadership. Even in the men's groups that you started on with early on, you were taking on that leadership role, which doesn't come without responsibility. So where do you draw that boundary, and where is taking on too much responsibility that could have a problem? So it's that shadow side, and how do you balance it and integrate it into your day-to-day life?
Yeah. I think what really helped me was the drama triangle. So for listeners who don't know what that is, it's a relational model, and there's like an unhealthy positions to be in and then healthy positions to be in. So the unhealthy positions are the victim, the hero, and the persecutor. Sometimes might be called the villain. And I realized I was spending a lot of my time in hero because it felt comfortable for me to be one up from other people. There's another relationship model, TA today, which is parent, adult, child. And I liked being the parent, which kind of meant that I would be in relationship with people that liked being the child. So here I am. I want to be the hero rescuing the victim on these drama triangles. And when my therapist shared that with me, and that aha moment of, oh my God, I'm seeing this in all of my relationships. I started to work more on moving to the healthy one, which ironically is a coach. So it's not a surprise that my career has been coaching from an early age or leadership. And I think one of the best ways I can describe it is the hero fishes for you. So you come to the hero and say, feed me, and the hero provides you with the food, and off you go. And you as a victim keep coming back to the hero for help. The hero gets something from it because they feel valuable, but they keep you down below them, and they stop you from learning and developing resilience and developing self-confidence. And I looked at my relationships and I thought, I don't want those relationships anymore where I'm the one who's okay and everybody else isn't. And I think as I first moved out of being not wanting to be like my dad, that felt a healthy place to go because it felt like I was giving value to the world. And then I realized that actually I wasn't, because I was stopping other people's development and I was stopping them from being able to do the work they needed to do.
Mm-hmm.
So instead of supporting them, I was doing it for them.
Mm-hmm.
And that coincided with I had a really bad cycling crash, broke my shoulder very badly, had to have 2 reconstructive surgeries. And it was the first time in my life where I was truly able to recognize my own vulnerability. So I had this accident. A funny story with this. I'm getting examined in the hospital after I've had this crash. The doctor grabs my arm to see what my mobility like is and immediately dislocates my shoulder because it's just so destroyed. I scream at him. He runs away. I have to put my own shoulder back in. I drove home, which was a 4-hour drive, and no painkillers or anything because I had to drive. So I get home. I go to my girlfriend at the time, like I've really hurt myself. And she's, oh, you'll be fine. Not really able to fully care for me. I go and see the orthopedic doctor and he's, oh no, this is really bad. You've broken 4 bones in your shoulder. I was the defending national champion. The national championships were 10 days later. I was desperate to race. And he just looked at me and went, no. So had an operation. And even my choices leading up to that, my biggest emotional supporters were my mum and my girlfriend. I chose to have my operation while both of them were on holiday, which was a stupid choice. Here's me, like, I'm okay.
Mm-hmm.
Most scary thing that's ever happened to me at that point in my life was having this operation. It was a complex operation. At that point, my arm didn't really work and I didn't know what was going to happen. I rang a friend and I said, can you take me to hospital? And he said, it's 1 mile away. Just get a cab, mate. And what I didn't quite realize was what I was saying. Can you come hold my hand? Because I'm really fucking scared and I
Yeah.
want somebody to be with me
Yeah.
emotionally and take me to the hospital. And I had that realization while I was sitting there waiting for the operation. I am feeling incredibly vulnerable and I don't know what to do with it.
Mm.
And nobody's even realizing it. I was so good at being okay that even in like my worst moment, nobody even realized I needed support.
Mhm.
And first I was angry, like, why are they not realizing it? And then I thought, you know what, this is actually my responsibility because I'm not telling people. They're used to me always being okay. So I need to share it. So I had that first operation, woke up, decided I was going to change my life, renegotiated all of my friendships, split up with my partner of 4 years because I could see that she was not going to be what I needed moving forwards, that I needed an equal relationship,
Mhm.
not an unequal relationship. And renegotiated, as I said, all of my friendships. Some of my friendships I ended, and I was like, this is not it's not working.
Yeah.
You want me to be the hero. You want to be the victim. I don't want that for
Yeah.
the next 30, 40 years of my life.
Yeah.
And some friends were great and listened. I had to have a second surgery 6 months later, and 5 of my friends took me to hospital and came and sat with me and waited until I had the operation. And it just completely different experience. And I hope you, the listener, doesn't have to break your shoulder or have a traumatic injury to get to this point, to know that it's okay to ask for help. And my life has been so much better since I've been able to do that. And maybe this is part of that shame piece of feeling weak and vulnerable was the worst thing for me. My dad would always be the victim. He would manipulate people from the place of being the victim of, you don't love me, you don't care enough about me, you don't want to do this for me. So I hated that position. Instead of going, oh, it's okay to have needs. There's a difference between being a victim and having needs and asking to get your needs met. So since then, I've become much, much better at saying, hey, I have these needs. Can you help me? Much better at it, at whatever it is. Starting my business, I need somebody to help me start my business. I've had a conflict with somebody, I need to vent, ringing a friend up and saying, I need to vent, I'm struggling with this, can you help me? I've become so much better and my life is just so much more enjoyable and my friendships are equal friendships. It's give and take, lean on them, lean on me. And life just feels so much better because of that.
Yeah, no, I appreciate all of that because there's so much wisdom in there. And I love the drama triangle because I use this all the time with clients. It's so powerful. And you could actually understand because to get to some of the nuances that you touched on, you can understand why you took on that role of being the hero or the rescuer because that was the pattern that was developed in your household, especially with your dad. And then even to have that wisdom to recognize those were the relationships that you had cultivated and you needed a change where it was equal footing, right? Not being the victim, but being able to ask for help when you need it and give help when you need it, but not coming from a place of validation that I'm providing help. And I think that what you touched on earlier too, that hero struggles to relinquish that role because then they know they won't be needed anymore. And that could be a difficult thing and comes at the cost of their own identity of being that rescuer. So I appreciate all of that. So I do want to now understand what does the leadership coaching look like in your framework and what does it entail in terms of because a lot of people say, yeah, I'm a leader and I'm good at my job or I'm good at leading people, but sometimes their own ego or their shadow side can come out as well. And considering you've spent so much time navigating that for yourself, you can probably spot that in other leaders. So, yeah, if you're able to shed some light on what is your framework and what are some of the common issues you see when you're working with leaders.
Yeah. The first bit, you've just addressed it. If you haven't done your own stuff and you haven't done your own work, you can't do this work for other people or do it with other people. And I had this shift during my cycling coaching where to begin with, I thought I needed to know everything. I needed to have all the answers. And that was my job as a cycling coach. And also the athletes needed to rely on me, right? I had to be there and there to rely on me. And as I was learning myself and I was having this shift about what it really means to be a leader and to support others, I got to the point where I thought my role as a coach was to do myself out of a job. So my role is to get you to such a place that you don't need me. That's the ideal version of it for me. And still now with my leadership coaching. And what I realized is that you don't do yourself that much job, because you're still valuable. Even if that person is super capable, you are still valuable because you're still a sounding board. You're still somebody to talk about. But the level of conversation is so much better for you and them. I moved to this coaching model of, this is a sports coach model first, of I would always say, what did you think happened there? What do you think you need to do? What do you think you need to improve? So that I was teaching them to critique and coach themselves. And then if they missed something, I would add and say, okay, and how about this? And I saw this as well. But my job was to teach them so that we got to the Olympics and I got food poisoning, their result is going to be exactly the same whether I'm on the sideline or not. And I used to see so many other sports coaches that were the opposite of that. They needed people to rely on them. And I was also studying some of Jung's work and the Love of the Warrior, the Magician, and the King, and just realizing that I was moving out of that boyhood immature masculinity into the mature masculine. And the mature masculine is this empowering others to be the best versions of themselves, where the boyhood masculine is, look at me, I'm the hero, I'm the best, and letting go of that and realizing it was about empowering other people and being of service. And that's the model I use for my coaching. I'm here to be of service to you. The way I view it is I meet you wherever you're at. I think leadership is about meeting people where they're at and adapting yourself as a leader or as a coach to be the best support for those people, and then asking the questions, giving the reflections that help people understand themselves. So how I look at leadership is same as coaching. If you don't understand yourself, so let me backtrack a bit. Typically, my clients are the smartest people in the room. The people that intimidate other people, I want you as a client. I love that. And I love the thrill of seeing if I'm up for the task. And those people come to me and they're like, I can't get this person to do this, or this person won't do that. And I need this, and I want this efficiency. And they get a little bit confused when I say, okay, let's look at you. How are you showing up? What are you doing? What are you taking responsibility for? And after we do some work together, they start to realize their impact, how they're creating these systems and these situations. And then they start to take control of it. And they're like, okay, how can I show up differently? So it's helping people realize, who are you? What qualities do you bring into the world? A model I like is we establish 5 personality traits for somebody, which I think are what you're born with and enter the world with. So mine are brilliance, play, vision, connection, and presence. I'm smart, very playful, and that can be both competition, games, humor. I'm able to see complex things and make them simple. That's the vision. Connection's super important to me. I have a lot of friends. I work very hard on keeping in connection with my friends. I have a lot of rituals, standing calls where I keep connected with people. And I'm very present. If we're having a conversation, you will know I'm in the room and I am listening to you. And I'm also 6'2" and 200 pounds, an ex-athlete. I have a physical presence. And then how did the world meet me? And how did I adapt to that? And one of the adaptions that we saw for me, where a couple of them were working with my coaches, was one was tyrannical Einstein. So I would use my intelligence to control everything so that I could be safe, especially around my dad. And I think as I've learned more about autism, there's also a little bit of crossover on the autism of I need to be comfortable and I need things to be in a certain way for me to be comfortable. I'm very particular. And a couple of my best mates who've known me for the longest will say, yeah, Lee's pretty particular about stuff. And they included that in the best man speech. And I do. And I need things to be a certain way to be comfortable. And I've got good at 2 things. 1, knowing when I can let go of that and be okay. And 2, knowing when I need that and making sure that I have it so it doesn't impact other people in the same way. But also there was definitely a controlling part of me to protect myself, to the point that now I'm probably more afraid of that part of me rearing its head than it does rear its head. So now my work is to know when it's okay to be that part of me. And there's a clear going to anger for men. It's okay to be angry sometimes. Mm-hmm. A lot of men that come to my groups are terrified of anger because they think it's either got to be rage and they've got to have a fight with somebody, or there can't be anger. And it's no, anger is a tool to use to be clear and to be precise and to be direct and to get what you need. So that my work has been having that clarity of a little bit less of the tyrant, but a bit more of the clarity and directness that I already have, but in a kind way. Mm-hmm. And I think Often the feedback I get from people on myself as a coach is I'm very direct. We don't mess around. And I'm able to do that because I create this immense space of love. So people feel very safe with me. They know that if I reflect something to you that you're not going to like or is going to be uncomfortable to hear, it's not because I'm showing off. It's not because I want to punish you. It's because this is a gift that I think you need to make the difference that you're telling me you want to make in your life.
Yeah.
And it's a balance, and sometimes overstep it.
Mhm.
And sometimes you don't step up enough.
Yeah.
And what I've got really good at is when I overstep it, recognizing it and saying, hey, that's on me. I've gone a bit too far here, or let me say that again in a different way, or let me just let you sit with that. And I wish anybody listening here would be a little bit more courageous in the way that they go through the world, trusting that you can tidy up any mistakes that you make.
Mhm.
And I think that's a lot of the work that I do with my clients is say the thing to the other person the way you just said it to me, and trust if it doesn't go how you want it to, you can tidy it up. It's going to be okay.
Yeah. Yeah. Because there's an aspect of risk involved in anything, and you have to be willing to take that risk, but also learn
Yeah.
from it. That's where that humility is so important. So then how does the Olympic mindset fit into your framework, and how do you help leaders have that Olympic mindset? Because one of the things that really stood out to me in terms of what you were sharing was, and you talked about Robert Moore's book, The King, Warrior, Magician, and Lover, the empowering others and serving others. I think a lot of people in leadership positions lose sight of that. And that's something I've experienced too. And they may, very similar to what you're sharing, feel that fear that if I'm empowering others, then I may not be needed anymore. And then that service piece is just that next step that you have to think about in terms of being able to serve others. But how does the Olympic mindset fit into all of this?
Yeah. I'm going to break those up because they're two separate things. So I'm
Yes.
going to address the serving thing first. How I've seen it play out for me, and my belief is my job is to serve people as best as I can, be that individual people, be that cycling communities, which I used to make better and put more races on and raise the standard of how we were doing things. And now systems in companies and the way that executives interact with each other and the culture of the company. And there will be a time when I'm no longer needed, and that's wonderful. That's exactly how it should be. Just as when you're a parent, there is a time when your children don't need you to do everything for them anymore, and they get their own independence, and off they go into the world. And then the relationships change. And I'm friends with many of the people I've coached, and they're still in my life, and our relationship has changed. And I love that. I love that so much. And I believe there's so many people that need my service or service of people like me that I will never run out of people to help. So I'm never going to be useless. I'm never going to be discarded because there's always somebody that needs support. There's always another organization or another system. And that's just how life has progressed for me. So I think once you understand that the job is so much bigger than this person right now or this team right now, there's always more to be done and more to take on. It's so much easier to let go and go, I don't need this. And it's not about me anyway. So I think there's that part. Remind me what the second part of the question was.
Yeah, I was fitting the Olympic mindset into all
Oh,
of that.
yeah. So what I saw and what I particularly gravitated towards and I liked about the sporting arena was this relentless pursuit of excellence. And in the best performing teams, athletes, coaches, participants in programs, strength and conditioning coaches, physiologists, psychologists, there was this ability to put your ego to one side to go, what's the best thing we can do right now? Do I need to refer you out to somebody else? Do I need to say, I don't know the answer. Let's go and explore this together. And I had an athlete that I worked with that ended up winning the silver medal at the Olympics go on to work with other coaches and come back to me afterwards and say, you're the best coach I've ever worked with. And I said, why? You went on with these other coaches and your career kept progressing. He said, you're the only coach I've ever worked with that could say, I don't know. Let's look at it. Or I don't know. Let's go and find somebody who's an expert in that. And I think I've always had that self confidence and belief to go, I don't have to have the answer, especially as I said earlier in this conversation, like progressing past that, the confidence of you don't have to have all the answers. And people trust you much more as a leader and as a coach when you say, I don't know, let's go and explore it. Or, hey, let's find somebody who can teach us on that. I want to learn too. Let's learn together. Or why don't you, as an athlete, why don't you go and find out and come back to me and teach me? And that's a relationship that I have with the leaders that I work with. That's a relationship that I had with the elite athletes that I work with. And for me, that Olympic mindset is a bit of the Japanese Kaizen principle of let's improve all of these different things a little bit at a time so that we get a big cumulative effect. And I see that in companies. Just how do you give feedback? Right, let's just tweak how you're giving feedback. And I have a model for giving feedback that people find particularly effective. I do a workshop on it, and then we practice it, we role model it, and then they go and do it. And immediately the company starts doing better because they're able to give better feedback and hear better feedback from each other. So it's how you do all of these little processes better for a larger cumulative effect. And then how you let go of the ego so that you become curious. What can we do better? How can we do differently? And me not knowing or me not being optimized right now is not a reflection of me as a human being. It's just a reflection of the knowledge I have. And I think the last thing I want to share with people there is I move from this, I need to know it all, to I'm going to work with the best information I have now. And if a better idea comes up, I'm going to go to that. I'm not just going to flip-flop, completely change the way we're doing something overnight because someone on a podcast said this one thing I heard. I'm going to research it because I love that. But if there is genuinely a provable better way of doing something, I'm not going to go, this is the way we do it and keep doing it. I'm going to switch. And I saw that in the less successful coaches. They had a lot of dogma about this is the way I do it. This is my coaching model. This is the way we have done it. And I'll give you an example. I moved to this track and we did a warm-up. So, typically when you're doing a training session, there's a warm-up part of the session, then there's the working part of the session, then there's a cool down afterwards. So we do this warm-up. They had a warm-up at the track. I just joined in. I'm new there. I'm like, let me just experience it. And the warm-up finished in a race and people are racing each other at the end of the warm-up. So we do the warm-up and I asked the coach after, I said, why do you do the warm-up like that? And they're like, oh, that's the way we do it here. I'm like, okay, cool. For what reason do you do the warm-up in that way? And they're like, well, this is the way that we do it. I'm like, yeah, let me try again. What's the outcome that you're looking for from this warm-up? And that's just the way we do it. And we've always done it. I'm like, and they couldn't get that. I'm like, how does your warm-up affect what you're going to do afterwards? And the warm-up was so hard that the quality of the training session was negatively affected afterwards. So people couldn't do a good workout because they'd worn themselves out in the warm-up, which is the opposite of what a warm-up's for. It's to prepare yourself for the workout. And it was at that moment I realized that so many people just do things because that's the way they've always done it. And what I would like to bring to the world is that moment where people stop and go, why am I doing this? And is this the most effective way to do it for me or for the people I'm with and the people I'm serving? Is there a better way? And if there is, how?
Yeah, no, and I think that's such a powerful question because we often just fall into that trap and go on autopilot and not even take that time to reflect. And this could apply to our day-to-day lives too, that why am I doing this thing just because I've been doing it for so many years? And
Yeah.
it's so important to have those reflection points. So now shifting into takeaways, and for people that are aspiring leaders or are in leadership positions, and I think depending on your perspective, you can be in a leadership position in many capacities, whether it's at home, for your children, for your spouse, for your family, for your community. So I think it's important to learn some of these things. And sometimes people lose sight of how much influence they have, even in those smaller capacities that we just take for granted. But what are some things people can focus on in their leadership journeys? And I know you've touched on some areas as well, even questioning how you're doing things or where your ego's coming up. But what are some things people can do that can help them further develop in their leadership journey?
Yeah. Oh, what a wonderful question. I think let's start with a couple of things. One, I think everybody's a leader.
Yeah.
Like at the very least, you're a leader of your own life.
Yes.
So everybody is leading in some way. I completely agree with you there. And also we're not good at recognizing our impact. We're not good at recognizing the influence and impact that we have on the people around us. I remember somebody reaching out to me to join a men's group. And I was like, oh, what made you reach out to me? And he said, we had a conversation with me 5 years ago at the velodrome and you were just so kind. I couldn't remember that conversation. I'm like, wow. So all the time we're moving through the world, we're having some kind of impact,
Mm-hmm.
positive, negative, neutral. So have more positive impact. A model I really like is a coaching company called the Conscious Leadership Group. And I don't know if they created it, but they've got a great video on this. It's called Above and Below the Line. So I think one of the biggest keys to us being successful in life, and by successful, fulfillment, not how much money you have and how big your house is and that kind of crap. It's how good you are at understanding and regulating your own emotional responses. So the way I would describe this is we have evolved to have emotional responses. These start with the fight, flight, freeze, or fawn system. So I'm walking across the plain. There's a tiger there. Do I want to fight it? Do I want to run away from it? Do I want to feed it, which would be fawning, or do I want to play dead? And our world is typically not that threatening anymore. We don't meet many tigers, but our biology is still behaving in the same way. And then with that trigger comes an emotion. Am I scared? Am I angry? Am I inquisitive? Like, how do I respond to that? And the people that I see enjoying their lives the most and being the most successful are those that understand this system. So understanding that they're getting triggered by something, that they are having a reaction, and the emotive part of their brain is reacting to it. And their cognitive part is just being conscious and observing that, okay, what do I feel? When guys come to my men's group, week one, we start talking about feelings. And they're not expecting that, especially not expecting that from a, ex-athlete. Okay, boys, let's talk about feelings. But the way I like to talk to them is their data. So I use 6 feelings: fear, joy, anger, sadness, interest, and disgust. And the reason for that is I don't want to make it complicated. Anger can be mild irritation to rage, like where are you on the scale, but it's still anger. We start to locate, what am I feeling? Okay, I feel anger. What does that anger tell me? Somebody's pushing my boundary. Okay, what do I want to do about it? And then that is moving to the cognitive conscious part of our brain of, okay, what would I like to do with this information? The feeling is data. What do I want to do with it? And if you allow yourself to feel it, feel this anger. Why am I angry? Be curious. Typically, the feeling passes quite quickly. And what I find a lot of men do is they push those feelings down, especially fear. Men have been shamed their entire life. Don't be a pussy. Don't be weak. Don't be a girl. All the bullshit homo slurs. I don't know why being homosexual, being a woman, are tougher in this world than being a man is. I don't know why that's a slur, but we do. And we have those slurs. We don't want to be seen as some way effeminate, or we perceive that to be weak. So we hate being afraid and we hate sharing fear. Yet fear is telling you something like, I'm going to do something. It's scary. I need to be prepared, for example. Okay, how do I prepare so that I can reduce these fear levels? Or how do I do this thing time and time again so that I get used to it and my fear levels come down? So the model I really like is this: what's my emotional experience right now? Am I in fight, flight, freeze, or fawn? What's the emotion that goes with that? And how would I like to consciously choose to be instead? And that's the above and below the line. The below the line is the instinctual, emotive reaction. The above the line is, what is my cognitive choice? Mm-hmm. And there's a third part to this, which I like to call the computer. This is our stored responses and memories, and we need to rewire those. So if I give you an example, you're driving down the road, somebody cuts you up, you flip them the bird. The stored memory is the reaction of flipping them the bird.
Yeah.
What I would like you to do instead, and I don't always do this, I am not perfect. What I'd like you to do instead is to think, what's going on for that other person? That makes us be cognitive. Right. Have they just got a call from their wife that she's fallen down the stairs and she's hurt herself and she needs help? Or have they just been let go from their job and they're really struggling? Or have they just had bad news? What is going on for that person? Because typically it's not about you, it's about them. So I really like this model. I use it with all my clients. I find it pretty effective way for people to stop, evaluate what's going on for them, and then make conscious choice. Mm-hmm. And what I would like most in the world is if I can impact people to have more conscious choice. Mm-hmm. And that goes back to what we're talking about with the cycling coaching of, why are you doing this? Is it working for you? Is it optimal? Or is there a better way of doing it? And it's the same with all of our relationships. Like, why do you respond like that? And if people haven't been introduced to this stuff, they just don't know.
Yeah.
It's not a case of they're stupid. I work with some of the smartest people in the world. It's not a lack of intelligence. It's just they typically just don't know it. Somebody's not introduced them to it.
Yeah.
And once you're introduced to it, your life can never go back, because now you see these interactions. You understand why you're making the choices that you make.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I appreciate all of that. And I was taking lots of notes here, but key themes that emerge for me is obviously don't underestimate your impact, because you never know how something you do, big or small, may affect someone. So don't ever underestimate that. That emotional regulation piece is so important, especially for men. I think we tend to struggle with it, but just
Yeah.
paying attention to our emotions and giving it some sort of name, which can help, but being able to regulate. And then the last piece that I was hearing from you was having that level of awareness too, where you can hold space for other people in terms of having that understanding and compassion, because that's how you can serve others, when you're able to put yourself in other people's shoes. And I think sometimes even the whole concept of empathy is misunderstood. And the best way I've been able to understand is like walking alongside someone, not necessarily taking on their problem, but just walking alongside them. And that's part of that service piece. So
Yeah.
I appreciate all of that. Thank you so much, Lee. And thank you again for coming on here and sharing so much of your own story, but your wisdom as well. And in terms of what you're doing to serve the world and help other leaders like yourself. But for listeners that want to learn more about your work, whether it's finding you online or finding the work you're doing in general, what are some ways they can do that?
Before we get to that, I want to thank you, Furkhan. Wonderful questions. I can see why you're so good at what you do. Great ability to listen and clarify what I was saying and then ask the questions that matter. So I appreciate that. I really enjoyed this conversation. I make things simple. That's my motto in life. Make it simple. So Lee Povey on everything. You find me on Instagram, Facebook, LinkedIn. That's where I do most of my kind of social media content and share most of my stuff. I have a newsletter. 10,000 people are subscribed. Come join us. I send out a newsletter every week with some help. And I have a group on Facebook, the Founders Catalyst, which is for founders and CEOs, where you can come and get support from other founders and CEOs. So yeah, just Google Lee Povey and you'll find me. Website's leepovey.com. I'd love to help. I've got a new men's group starting. I'm not sure when this is going to go out, but I've got a new men's group starting the 1st of May. If you missed that, I'll have another one 3 months after that. If anything we've talked about as a man sparks you that you're interested, reach out to me, whether you work with me or not. I'm very happy to have a conversation with you.
No, that's great. We'll put all of that in the show notes. But thank you again, Lee. Appreciate your time, and thank you for the kind words as well.
Thank you, mate.